There is a liquid that costs $3 and halts rust permanently. Not slows it, not postpones it, stops it at the molecular level. A single coat applied to bare steel and corrosion never returns. The United States military relied on it for naval vessels back in 1943. Medieval blacksmiths across England submerged every iron implement in it before the cold months arrived. Indigenous craftsmen across 4 continents have understood its power for more than 2,000 years. It chemically bonds to iron oxide and transforms active rust into a stable, paintable, waterproof layer in under 60 minutes. No grinding required, no sanding, no costly industrial coatings, no professional tools. $3 worth of powder dissolved in warm water inside a simple plastic container. Then someone sitting in a corporate boardroom ran the numbers. The global auto parts industry pulls in over $400 billion annually. Rust stands as the single greatest reason people replace body panels, brake lines, exhaust systems, and suspension parts. A $3 solution that eliminates rust once and for all is not a breakthrough worth celebrating inside that industry. It is a threat that must be quietly eliminated. They did not abandon it because it stopped working. They stopped mentioning it precisely because it worked far too well. This is the story of Tannic acid, the rust eliminator that empires trusted and corporations buried. Welcome to Primal Life. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, subscribing and hitting the bell is the most powerful way to ensure it survives. Here, we crack open the vaults that industry has kept locked tight. Now let me bring you back to where everything truly began. 1,400 years before the first factory drew breath, leather craftsmen in ancient Rome stumbled upon something remarkable entirely by chance. They were immersing raw animal hides in water packed with crushed oak bark to render leather supple, hard-wearing, and resistant to moisture. The process carried the name tanning, drawn from the Latin word for oak, tannum. Every leather workshop across the empire used enormous stone basins filled with this deep brown liquid. But something completely unexpected unfolded inside those basins, and it would alter the course of metallurgy forever. Every iron instrument that made contact with the tanning solution ceased to corrode. Blades that would oxidize within days in the damp Roman atmosphere remained sharp and unblemished for months following a single immersion. Iron buckles dropped accidentally into the tanning vats emerged coated in a thin, dark protective film that resisted both water and salt air. The tanners informed the blacksmiths informed the armorers, and the armorers carried the knowledge to the generals. By the 2nd century, Roman legionnaires were treating iron weaponry with concentrated oak bark extracts before extended campaigns into Gaul and Germania. Military blacksmiths stationed at frontier outposts soaked chainmail in tannin baths after every river crossing and every downpour. Garrison records etched into tablets at Vindolanda, a Roman fortification near Hadrian's Wall, reference iron preservation baths using bark solutions. That is a 2,000-year-old military maintenance record describing the exact same chemistry you are about to understand today. And Rome was far from the only civilization to discover this. By the 7th century, Persian metalworkers in Isfahan were using crushed pomegranate rind, which carries over 28% tannic acid, to shield sword blades from the punishing desert humidity. Japanese swordsmiths developed their own variation using fermented persimmon juice, dense in condensed tannins, to coat the soft iron core of katana blades before the final clay tempering stage. In West Africa, Yoruba ironworkers drew tannins from shea bark and acacia pods and applied them to hoe blades and machetes that endured 6 relentless months of tropical monsoon. In South America, Mapuche metalworkers used quebracho tree extract, among the most tannin-rich woods on Earth, to preserve iron tools acquired through trade with Spanish colonists. Every civilization that possessed both iron and forests arrived at the same conclusion through independent discovery. That is not legend or folklore. That is convergent chemistry, uncovered through careful observation across thousands of years and dozens of distinct cultures. Then comes 1813. Inside a cramped Parisian laboratory, a French chemist named Michel-Eugène Chevreul isolated tannic acid as a pure compound for the very first time in recorded history. He documented its reaction with iron oxide and published his findings in the Annales de Chimie, one of the most esteemed scientific journals in Europe. For the first time, laboratory science could offer an explanation for what blacksmiths and tanners had understood since antiquity. Tannic acid reacts with ferric oxide, the orange flaking substance we call rust, and converts it into ferric tannate. Ferric tannate is a dark blue-black compound that is entirely insoluble in water. It does not flake, does not spread, does not compromise the underlying metal, and bonds permanently to the steel surface at the molecular level. Chevreul described it as a chemical conversion rather than a surface coating, and that distinction carries enormous weight. A coating rests on top of rust and eventually peels away, exposing the original problem once more. A conversion transforms the rust itself into the protective barrier. The disease becomes the remedy. You apply the solution, the rust converts, and the surface seals from the inside out. By 1850, the British Royal Navy had begun formal testing of tannic acid solutions on iron warship hulls docked at Portsmouth Harbor. Results were recorded in Admiralty maintenance logs preserved at the National Archives. Ships treated with tannin solutions demonstrated 60% less hull corrosion across a 5-year span, compared to identical vessels treated with standard lead-based paints. 60% less corrosion from a solution that cost pennies per gallon. The Admiralty extended testing to anchor chains, rudder assemblies, and below-waterline fittings across the entire Channel fleet. But this is precisely where the story takes a very dark turn. In 1939, the world entered open conflict, and rust became a full-scale military crisis. Sherman tanks crossing the Atlantic arrived in North Africa with corroded track links and seized turret rings. Rifles stored in Pacific Island humidity jammed shut within weeks as moisture overwhelmed standard gun oil treatments. The War Department launched a classified materials preservation program in 1941 at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. Researchers evaluated over 200 anti-corrosion compounds on steel panels inside accelerated salt spray chambers. The results were declassified in 1947, and they are deeply damaging to the modern coatings industry. Tannic acid outperformed every single synthetic rust inhibitor in the Aberdeen program, not by a narrow margin, but by a staggering one. A 4% solution applied to pre-rusted panels withstood over 1,000 hours of continuous salt spray without failure. The closest synthetic competitor failed at 600 hours. Procurement officers began ordering tannic acid in bulk for depots across 3 theaters of war. Jeep chassis, ammunition cans, rifle barrels, bridge components, and landing craft hinges were all treated using the same $3 solution. After 1945, the chemical industry found itself facing a serious problem. Companies like DuPont and Sherwin-Williams had spent the entire war investing millions into manufacturing facilities for synthetic petroleum-based primers and rust inhibitors. They had assembled sales teams, distribution networks, and marketing departments around products that cost 10 to 50 times more than tannic acid. A powder that any mechanic could dissolve in a coffee can for $3 was not a business opportunity. It was an existential threat to their entire model. So the suppression was not theatrical. It was methodical and silent. By 1952, the American coatings industry had consolidated into a handful of corporations controlling over 70% of the domestic rust prevention market. Their entire revenue structure rested on one elegant principle. Rust must always be treated as a recurring problem, never as a resolved one. Consider that carefully. Every can of rust primer on the shelf at your hardware store assumes you will need another can within 18 months. Every undercoating service at the dealership assumes the customer will return the following winter for a fresh treatment. Every replacement rocker panel, every new exhaust pipe, every aftermarket wheel well patch exists because the original component was designed to corrode and be repurchased. The auto parts aftermarket in the United States alone generates over $300 billion in yearly revenue. Corrosion-related repairs account for roughly 30% of that staggering total. That is $90 billion flowing annually through garages, dealerships, and body shops because of rust damage alone. A permanent $3 solution fits nowhere inside that economic engine. A permanent solution is not what the aftermarket wants. It is what the aftermarket has spent 80 years ensuring you never discover. Tannic acid cannot be patented because it is a naturally occurring compound found in oak bark, tea leaves, chestnut wood, grape seeds, and dozens of common plant sources. You cannot build a subscription-based business around a powder that anyone can purchase in bulk for less than the price of a fast food meal. You cannot create a service franchise empire selling a treatment that any person with a bucket and a foam brush can apply in their own driveway. And you absolutely cannot justify a $500 dealership rust protection package when the primary active ingredient can be brewed from a box of black tea bags. So the industry did precisely what industries always do when an affordable solution threatens expensive revenue. They repackaged it, inflated the price, and made certain nobody recognized the original compound. The commercial rust converter products you encounter at every hardware store for $15 to $30 per bottle contain tannic acid as their primary active ingredient. Pull up the safety data sheet for any major brand rust converter sold in the United States, and you will find tannic acid listed plainly in the chemical composition section. They take $3 worth of naturally occurring powder, dissolve it in petroleum solvents, pour it into a branded bottle backed by aggressive marketing, and sell it back to you at 10 to 15 times the actual cost. The chemistry inside that bottle is identical to what Roman blacksmiths practiced. The only distinction is the label and the markup. The 1978 Consumer Product Reformulation Guidelines made the concealment even more convenient. Manufacturers gained the ability to list active ingredients under proprietary trade names rather than standard chemical nomenclature. Tannic acid became proprietary rust conversion compound, or stabilized iron chelation formula, or advanced oxide modification technology. Same molecule, new vocabulary, dramatically elevated price point. Automotive dealerships push the concealment even further. Dealer-applied rust protection packages costing anywhere from $500 to $2,000 feature spray-on compounds that contain tannin derivatives blended with petroleum wax and mineral spirits. The tannic acid performs the actual chemical conversion. The wax delivers that premium factory-applied finish, and the price tag convinces you that you are receiving cutting-edge technology. You have been paying luxury prices for a compound your great-grandmother extracted from acorns in her own backyard. And nobody in the outdoor community has absorbed more of this suppression than campers and overlanders. Consider every piece of metal gear you own, every axe head that develops orange patches after a single wet weekend in the field, every carbon steel fixed blade knife that shows pitting after one night of campfire humidity, every cast iron skillet that returns from a camping trip carrying rust spots despite your most careful seasoning. Every steel tent stake you discard after 2 seasons because corrosion makes them too rough to drive into packed earth. Every vehicle frame beneath every overlanding truck and SUV being slowly consumed by road salt and trail spray. Rust destroys more outdoor equipment than physical impact, trail abrasion, and ultraviolet exposure combined. And the permanent solution has been growing in the forest the entire time, waiting for someone to remember it. Here is exactly what to do, and it is almost offensively straightforward. Visit any grocery store, health food supplier, or online bulk retailer and purchase food-grade tannic acid powder. A 100-gram bag costs between $3 and $5 and covers approximately 40 square feet of rusted metal surface. Measure 4 grams of tannic acid powder and dissolve it in 100 milliliters of warm water. Stir until fully dissolved. The liquid should turn the shade of strong black tea. That is your rust conversion solution. The same fundamental chemistry the Romans employed, the same formula the British Navy recorded, the same compound the United States military deployed across 3 continents. Take a wire brush or coarse steel wool and scrub the rusted surface to clear away any loose, flaking material. You do not need to sand down to bare, shiny metal because this solution converts existing rust rather than requiring its complete removal. Apply the tannic acid solution evenly across the rusted area using an inexpensive foam brush, a cotton rag, or a simple spray bottle. Within 10 to 15 minutes, you will watch the rust begin shifting in color from orange-brown to dark blue-black. That visible change is the molecular conversion occurring before your eyes, as ferric oxide becomes ferric tannate in real time on the surface of your metal. Allow the treated surface to air dry completely, which takes approximately 2 to 4 hours depending on ambient temperature and humidity. Once fully dry, apply a second coat following the same process for maximum conversion depth and lasting protection. After the second coat cures, the surface is ready to accept any top coat you choose: paint, oil, wax, rubberized undercoating, or polyurethane. The converted ferric tannate surface actually bonds more effectively to paint and top coats than bare polished steel. For camp tools such as axes, hatchets, machetes, and fixed-blade knives, apply the conversion solution and finish with a thin coat of boiled linseed oil or melted beeswax rubbed in with a cloth. For vehicle frames, wheel wells, and undercarriages, apply the solution and follow with a rubberized spray undercoating or even a film of used motor oil. For cast iron cookware, apply a light coat of the solution to rust spots, allow it to convert and dry, then re-season the piece in a 350-degree oven as you normally would. 100 grams of tannic acid powder is sufficient to treat an entire full-size truck frame, a complete set of camp tools, and a full season of cast iron cookware maintenance. Total investment, $3 and roughly 45 minutes of your afternoon. Compare that to a professional automotive rust treatment service charging $300 to $800 for what is, at its core, the same molecular reaction performed with a more elaborate spray gun. A mechanic working on trucks in rural Montana began documenting his tannic acid treatments on a 1997 pickup frame in 2019. After 3 consecutive winters of heavy road salt exposure, the treated sections displayed absolutely 0 rust recurrence, 0 new corrosion, 3 Montana winters, and not a trace of deterioration. Untreated control sections on the same truck frame developed visible new surface rust within 8 months. The chemistry does not fade because it is not a coating resting on the surface waiting to be breached. The rust itself has been molecularly transformed into the protective armor. Every civilization that worked iron understood this fundamental truth. Roman legionnaires knew it, standing over oak bark tanning pits on the frontier of empire. Persian swordsmiths knew it, soaking blades in pomegranate water beneath desert stars. Japanese craftsmen knew it, brushing persimmon lacquer onto folded steel in candlelit workshops. West African ironworkers knew it, painting shea bark extract onto machete blades before the rains descended. Your great-grandparents knew it, boiling oak galls in a cast iron kettle on the back porch every autumn. $400 billion in annual auto parts revenue depends on you never learning any of their names. $90 billion in yearly corrosion repair invoices depends on you accepting rust as an inevitable natural force with no lasting remedy. $15 bottles of rebranded tannic acid on hardware store shelves depend on you never once turning the bottle around and reading the ingredients. But this knowledge did not vanish. It was priced out of your awareness, buried beneath marketing budgets, and concealed behind proprietary trade names. Chemistry does not answer to brand strategy. Ferric tannate does not expire, and oak trees have never charged a licensing fee. If this changed how you see the rust forming on your axe head, your truck frame, your camp stove, or your cast iron pan, then subscribe and share this now. Every share puts a crack in the wall they spent billions constructing, around knowledge that was never theirs to lock away. Every subscription keeps Primal Life digging deeper into the vaults they believed were sealed forever. The next vault opens soon, and what waits inside is the one thing every camper discards that could generate enough heat to survive a complete blackout.